The winds that swept across the forests and rivers of Eastern Europe carried more than the scent of pine and soil. They carried whispers of change, of a world on the brink of transformation. In this wild, untamed land, scattered tribes eked out lives along the winding rivers, unaware that their footsteps were tracing the beginnings of a civilization whose echoes would one day be heard in the names of two nations. The rivers were more than water, they were lifelines and highways, cutting through dense woodlands, connecting settlements in a rhythm as ancient as the land itself. Each bend in the Dnieper, each sunlit ripple on the Desna, told stories of survival, ambition, and the quiet stirring of a people slowly shaping history. Long before chronicles were etched on parchment, long before Kievan carried meaning, the Slavs lived quietly among forests, meadows, and marshes. They were attuned to the rhythms of nature, to the migrations of animals, to the turning of seasons. Their homes were built of wood, not stone, and clustered along rivers where fish, fertile soil, and waterfowl ensured sustenance. Life was harsh but rhythmic, marked by festivals, storytelling, and rituals that tethered them to both the land and the unseen world around them. Yet these people were far from isolated. Trade networks stretched astonishingly far, Baltic amber drifted down rivers, furs and honey moved south, and slowly the Slavs became part of a wider web connecting Scandinavia, Byzantium, and the steppe nomads to the east. The rivers were veins, the forests lungs. Unlike the empires of Rome or Byzantium, their world was rooted not in conquest but survival, and yet, within them, a restless ambition simmered, a sense that something greater awaited. Archaeological finds hint at this early drive: burial mounds, fortified settlements, specialized crafts, and far-reaching trade links. The Slavs were not mere peasants, they were innovators, artisans, and proto-architects of social structures capable of supporting princes and kings. Fortified wooden settlements show concern for both survival and defense, a recognition that control of the land demanded vigilance, cunning, and courage. The landscape itself played a role. Dense forests could conceal enemies or shelter communities, rivers could nourish crops or bring raiders. The Dnieper, in particular, was a silent witness to generations of ambition, fear, and ingenuity, guiding people, goods, and ideas along its course. And over it all, stories were passed down orally, fragments of memory, myth, and legend, linking tribes through shared identity, teaching lessons about leadership, courage, and the mysteries of the world beyond. It is easy to forget that this prehistory was a crucible of creativity. Pottery, tools, and jewelry reveal artistry, communication, and trade. Agriculture, herding, and metallurgy were advancing, laying the groundwork for the urban centers of Kievan Rus. Yet fragility remained. Tribes rose and fell, winters were harsh, disease struck swiftly, and raids could undo years of labor. In this precarious balance of risk and ambition, the seeds of history were sown. The stage was being set for convergence. Geography, culture, and ambition would meet outsiders from the north, the Varangians, and rivers would transform from simple lifelines into arteries of a new polity. The forests and rivers had nurtured a people ready to step into history, not merely as survivors, but as architects of empires. In these shadowed groves and along winding rivers, Kievan Rus was quietly gestating, its first chapter written in the courage, cunning, and hope of a people preparing for a destiny that would astonish generations yet unborn. Rivers are more than water, they are destiny in motion. And on these very rivers, moving silently through the mist and the morning chill, came strangers whose names would become legend, the Varangians. To the Slavs, they were something between traders, raiders, and gods walking among men. From the cold forests of Scandinavia, they had voyaged south, drawn by the promise of trade, tribute, and power, carrying longships that glinted like steel serpents under the northern sun. These northern men, tall, imposing, often with braided hair and axes sharp enough to split timber or skull, moved with a purpose. They were skilled navigators, reading currents, stars, and winds with an instinct that seemed almost supernatural. Yet they were also cunning diplomats, capable of friendship or treachery depending on which brought them the greatest advantage. For the Slavs, their arrival was both thrilling and terrifying. The rivers had long been lifelines, channels of survival and trade, but now they were highways for strangers who could bring wealth or ruin in equal measure. The story begins with Rurik, a name that would echo through centuries, cloaked in legend and uncertainty. Who he truly was, historians still debate. Some claim he was a Varangian chieftain summoned to rule over the fractious Slavs, a foreigner chosen to impose order where tribal squabbles threatened the fragile balance of life. Others whisper that his ancestry was even more mysterious, tracing back to distant lands and long-forgotten kings. In any case, the moment he arrived in Novgorod, the course of Eastern Europe began to shift in ways no one could have predicted. Imagine the scene, the wooden palisades of Novgorod rising above frozen banks, villagers peering anxiously from behind them as longships creaked into the harbor. The Varangians disembarked with confident strides, their eyes scanning, assessing, calculating. Negotiations were not always polite. Sometimes tribute was demanded, sometimes loyalty was bought with the promise of protection against rival tribes. Yet gradually, a delicate order emerged. Rurik and his men brought structure to the chaos, a centralized authority, a chain of command, and a system for resolving disputes that had previously erupted in blood feuds and endless skirmishes. It is fascinating to consider that the rise of Kievan Rus may have hinged on a combination of diplomacy, intimidation, and charisma. Rurik did not simply conquer, he co-opted. He married into influential families, forged alliances, and understood that power was as much about perception as it was about force. The Slavs, in turn, began to recognize that these outsiders could provide something rare: stability, protection, and a framework for trade that promised prosperity beyond anything they had known. Trade was the lifeblood of this new order. The Varangians were master merchants as well as warriors. They linked the rivers of the north to the riches of Byzantium, to the silver of the Arabian caliphates, and to the amber coasts of the Baltic. Furs, honey, wax, and slaves flowed southward, while luxury goods, coins, and ideas traveled north. The rivers that had sustained the Slavs for centuries now became arteries of wealth and influence, and the Varangians were the masters of this flow. Their presence elevated local settlements into emerging centers of power, the seeds of cities that would later become Kyiv, Novgorod, and Smolensk. Yet this story is far from a simple tale of rulers and merchants. It is woven with intrigue, ambition, and moments of near catastrophe. The Dnieper winds like a silver ribbon through the land, and at one of its commanding curves, a city began to awaken. Kyiv was not built in a day, it rose slowly, like dawn revealing hidden valleys. Before it became the jewel of Kievan Rus, it was a cluster of wooden dwellings, simple fortifications, and the whispers of tribes negotiating survival. Yet even then, something remarkable was taking shape, drawing people, traders, and armies, laying the foundations of a civilization destined to echo through centuries. Legend credits Kyiv's founding to three brothers, Chi, Shek, Koriv, and their sister Libid. Whether real or symbolic, the story captured generations' imagination. Situated where the Dnieper cuts south, the city commanded trade routes from the Baltic to the Black Sea, linking northern forests to Byzantine wealth. Hills provided defense, the river served as highway and lifeline, and merchants from north and south brought furs, silks, coins, and ideas. Kyiv became a crossroads where cultures fused, craftsmen learned foreign techniques, and knowledge flowed as freely as trade. Early Varangian rulers cultivated alliances, fortified the city, and maintained vigilance. The Dnieper could be treacherous, bandits lurked, and political rivalries threatened stability. Yet Kyiv flourished as a political, cultural, and economic hub. By century's end, the city had become the heart of a fledgling state, a crucible of identity and ambition, poised to chart the course of nations and echo through history. Power in Kievan Rus was never static. It flowed like the rivers that shaped the land, unpredictable, unstoppable, demanding skill and cunning from those who sought it. Kyiv had risen as a beacon of trade and culture, but its success made it a magnet for ambition. Princes, bound by blood yet divided by greed, jostled for authority, their rivalries weaving diplomacy, deception, and violence into the fabric of the realm. Succession was labyrinthine, with control rotating among brothers and cousins. Loyalty could be bought with marriage or gifts, yet betrayal lurked at every turn. Every decision was a gamble, every negotiation a potential trap. Volodymyr the Great embodied this turbulent era. Threatened by rival siblings and wary nobles, he combined ambition with political instinct, knowing that authority required legitimacy, alliances, and the ability to inspire both fear and loyalty. His campaigns were brutal, yet they forged a more unified state capable of enduring external threats and internal dissent. Kievan princes balanced nomadic raids, tributary towns, and foreign powers, adopting strategies, military techniques, and ideas to strengthen their rule. Politics was living and relational, intertwined with personal ambition. Families were torn apart, alliances shattered, betrayals carried deadly consequences. Yet amid this turbulence, the foundations of the state solidified, and the struggles of princes forged a system where power, politics, and ambition shaped the destiny of nations yet to be born. The rivers of Kievan Rus had long whispered stories of forests, tribes, and distant horizons, but a new current arrived from the south, carrying faith, gold, and the glitter of Byzantine domes. Under Volodymyr the Great, pagan groves gave way to churches, shamans to priests, and seasonal rituals blended with sacraments. Christianity was more than belief, it was a framework for governance, a bridge to Byzantium, and a spark for a cultural revolution. Icons, relics, and mosaics transformed villages into centers of art, literacy, and law, while linking Kievan Rus to trade networks, diplomacy, and ideas far beyond the rivers. As faith reshaped society, Kievan Rus entered its golden age. Cities buzzed with trade, artisans crafted jewelry and manuscripts, and law codes regulated complex social life. Yet wealth and sophistication masked fragility, princely rivalries simmered, alliances shifted, and rivers that brought prosperity could also carry raiders. Fragmentation soon followed. Dynastic quarrels, autonomous towns, and nomadic incursions left the realm vulnerable, setting the stage for a greater threat from the east. The Mongols arrived, razing cities and reshaping politics. Tribute, flight, and fortification became survival tools, yet culture and faith endured, planting the seeds of future states. From the ashes emerged distinct northern and southern identities, laying the foundations of Russia and Ukraine. Even today, Kievan Rus lives in myth, chronicles, and collective memory. Princes, warriors, and saints echo through cities, rivers, and trade routes. Its legacy is not relic but living thread, a story of ambition, faith, and resilience that continues to shape the destiny of nations.